On September 7th, 2025, tens of thousands filled St. Peter's Square as Pope Leo XIV led his very first canonization ceremony. The historic day proclaimed Carlo Acutis, the 15-year-old computer whiz known as God's influencer, and Pier Giorgio Frassati as saints of the Catholic Church. For many, the canonization was expected to be solemn, holy, and celebratory. Yet what unfolded went beyond ritual. It felt like a miracle that touched the very air. As Pope Leo spoke Carlo's name, a stillness came over the massive crowd of nearly 80,000 pilgrims. Witnesses later recalled that the square seemed to breathe differently, as though heaven itself was leaning close. Some wept without knowing why, others whispered prayers that caught in their throats, and many said they felt something indescribable, the living presence of Carlo Acutis himself. It wasn't a ghostly apparition, nor a spectacle of lights. It was a sensation that united strangers into a single heartbeat of faith. Mothers clutching children, priests raising rosaries, teenagers lifting phones for live streams, all testified later that they sensed Carlo was not just being remembered, but was with them in spirit. And in that collective awareness, the day of his canonization transformed from ceremony to miracle. Carlo Acutis was called many things in life, a normal teenager with a PlayStation and a skateboard, but above all, God's influencer. From his bedroom in Milan, he built a website that catalogued Eucharistic miracles from around the world, believing the internet could be a tool to bring people closer to Christ. He once said, "The Eucharist is my highway to heaven." During the canonization, those words seemed to echo in the hearts of the faithful. As Pope Leo XIV recalled Carlo's love for the Eucharist and his digital mission, many pilgrims described a sudden warmth that filled the square. It wasn't the Roman sun. They said it felt as though Carlo himself was smiling upon them, encouraging them to use their own talents, screens, and skills for holiness. One young pilgrim later explained, "I looked up at the basilica, and I felt like Carlo was saying, 'Don't waste your life. Make it count for God.'" Another said the air seemed to hum with presence, a quiet miracle where memory turned into reality. For the first time, the Church was proclaiming a saint of the digital generation, and in that moment, it was as if Carlo's mission came alive again, not on a website, but in the beating hearts of thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square. For Carlo to be canonized, the Church required verified miracles attributed to his intercession. 2 were officially recognized. The first involved a Brazilian boy suffering from a rare pancreatic condition who was inexplicably healed after praying to Carlo. The second was the recovery of a young Costa Rican student who suffered a devastating brain injury. Her mother prayed at Carlo's tomb, and the girl awakened, healed beyond medical explanation. At the canonization, these miracles were not just historical notes, they were present in a living way. Relics connected to Carlo's life and death were carried through the square, displayed reverently before Pope Leo XIV and the faithful. Pilgrims testified that as the relics passed, they felt chills run through their bodies, a shiver not of cold but of awe. Others said they sensed waves of peace washing over them, as if Carlo's youthful spirit was reaching across eternity to touch their hearts. In a church often accused of being distant or formal, this moment was different. It was intimate, real, and electrifying. The miracles weren't only about the healed boy and girl. That morning in St. Peter's Square, thousands claimed they experienced a miracle too, not of the body, but of the soul, a presence that was undeniable. Carlo was there. When the proclamation was complete and the bells of St. Peter's rang out, Pope Leo XIV rose to deliver his homily. His voice carried across the square, firm yet tender, as he reminded the world that Carlo Acutis and Pier Giorgio Frassati were not saints because of their extraordinary achievements, but because of their ordinary faith lived extraordinarily well. He called Carlo a masterpiece of youthful holiness, a boy who showed the world that sanctity is not reserved for cloisters or pulpits, but can flourish even behind a computer screen. Pope Leo urged the faithful not to see Carlo's sainthood as distant or unreachable, but as an invitation. Holiness is possible for every young person, for every family, for every follower of Christ, here and now. As he spoke, something unexplainable happened. The crowd fell into a deep hush, as though even the breeze paused to listen. Witnesses later described it as a holy stillness, a sense that the words were not just Pope Leo's, but carried on the breath of the Spirit, and perhaps whispered by Carlo himself. One young pilgrim said, "I felt like Carlo was nodding along with the Pope, telling us, 'This is the path. Choose it.'" It was in that moment, many later recalled, that the miracle of presence became undeniable. The Pope's homily was not only instruction, it was encounter, and through his words, thousands felt the nearness of a teenage saint who once said, "We are all born originals, but many die as photocopies. Don't waste your life." As soon as the canonization concluded, Carlo Acutis's relics, most notably his heart, were prepared to begin a global pilgrimage. This was not just symbolic. For many, it was the continuation of the miracle that had swept through St. Peter's Square. One of the very first stops was Kochi, India, where on the very day of his canonization, a new church was blessed and dedicated to St. Carlo Acutis. The faithful there spoke of an atmosphere unlike any they had experienced. Children whispered prayers with surprising solemnity, and elders claimed they felt a warmth in their chest as the relic was presented, as though Carlo himself was walking among them. Reports came in from other places, too. In parishes across Europe and Latin America, believers said the air seemed to shift when the relics were displayed. Gentle breezes indoors, sudden stillness in the crowd, or an unshakable peace that brought tears to their eyes. Doctors, priests, and lay pilgrims alike struggled to put words to it. They all described it differently, but the conclusion was the same. Carlo was present. This moving sense of nearness didn't overshadow the Eucharist, Carlo's lifelong focus, but instead pointed people toward it. As one priest said during the tour, "It is as if Carlo is leading us by the hand, telling us again, 'The Eucharist is my highway to heaven. Make it yours, too.'" For many, the canonization of Carlo Acutis was not just another ceremony. It was a declaration that sainthood was no longer something of the distant past. Here was a teenager from the early 2000s, a boy who played PlayStation, loved soccer, wore sneakers, and built websites. He belonged to their world, and now he belonged to heaven. During the celebration, especially among the thousands of young people gathered, there was a tangible connection. Many described it as though Carlo was speaking directly to them, encouraging them not to waste time chasing empty approval, reminding them that holiness could be lived in the middle of homework, friendships, social media, and ordinary routines. Pope Leo XIV himself underlined this when he spoke of Carlo as a patron for the digital generation. He insisted that Carlo showed how even the most modern tools, computers, phones, the internet, could become instruments of light when used for truth and faith. The youth cheered, some waving small flags and banners with Carlo's image, and many later said they felt their hearts ignite with a purpose they had been missing. It was more than admiration, it was encounter. In the laughter of teenagers in the square, in the tears of parents who longed for their children to return to the church, in the hushed prayers of university students live-streaming the event from far away, the miracle continued. Carlo was alive in their midst, not in flesh, but in spirit. In the weeks following the canonization, testimonies poured in from across the globe. They didn't come only from the pilgrims in St. Peter's Square, but from Catholics watching online, gathering in parish halls, or praying in their homes. Many said they felt something they couldn't quite explain, an overwhelming peace, a sudden warmth in prayer, or even the impulse to return to confession after years away. One young woman in Mexico wrote that as she watched Pope Leo XIV raise his hands in blessing during the canonization, she felt a sudden breeze sweep through her closed room, followed by the deep conviction that Carlo was interceding for her faith. A priest in Brazil, who had been praying with young people during the live broadcast, testified that the group fell into silence at the exact moment Carlo's name was proclaimed. They later described it as the presence of a friend standing beside us. In Europe, older parishioners who had been skeptical about a millennial saint admitted that they felt something stir within them during the event. "I had doubted that holiness could exist in our times," one man from Spain confessed, "but when Pope Leo declared him a saint, I felt Carlo close, like a son of the Church who had come back for us." These quiet yet powerful experiences, though not official miracles in the Church's records, became part of the living miracle of Carlo's canonization. It was no longer just about the two medically verified healings. It was about countless unseen healings of the heart, the whispers of faith rekindled, and the sense that Carlo was walking invisibly among the people of God, urging them to turn to Christ.